Hi, everybody. So I want you to meet Matthew. I've been following him for a while on TikTok, and he's got amazing information, and I love the way that he presents it. So we're going to talk about him and his awakening today. Hi, Matthew.
Hey, how are you? It's good to be
Good.
here.
Thank you for coming. I'm so glad that it worked
Yeah,
out.
absolutely.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what's been going on with you in this awakening process.
Yeah, so I am 32. I had my spiritual awakening November 4th of 2022. So it's been a little over 1 year, and it has been the most amazing, wonderful, grueling, exhausting yet beautiful ever unfolding journeys that I've ever been through. I had my spiritual awakening, like I said, in November, and that was through my second meditation. So I'd never meditated before, was never religious, was never spiritual. In fact, I detested religion and God because I developed the judgments and the opinions on what God was through what organized religion was telling the world. And then organized religion is infiltrating, the government, all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I was unknowingly being pushed away and separated from God, and it was causing me to suffer in my life.
Mhm.
I was doing drugs in Chicago and drinking every weekend and going out with my friends and getting crazy and repeating all of these cycles in my life that led to suffering and verbal and emotional abuse and going through the same types of relationships and not my last relationship was great. He was wonderful. So I will say that.
Good.
Um, but it caused me to be really introspective. I was in the mortgage industry for a couple years. I managed a bakery right out of high school, or a bakery gas station right out of high school. I've always been a go-getter. I was always working, my way up the corporate ladder, was always wanting to make more money, was always chasing that American dream. I bought my first house at 29 years old. I made $200,000 at 28, 29, and then 30 in the mortgage industry. So like I achieved what I wanted, or I felt like I was supposed to achieve in this life, right? I went to school, I got my degree in finance, I busted my ass. Am I allowed to swear on here?
Yeah.
and and I was just missing something still. It still felt like there was something inside of me that was missing. I achieved everything I was supposed to achieve, but I was still struggling with anxiety, still struggling with panic attacks, still struggling with the depression. And I had asthma. My whole life I had asthma. I was on an inhaler my whole life, 3 to 4 times a day, steroids. In 2022, I went to the doctor 5 times and was put on steroids because I would get infections in my lungs and I thought I was going to be an old man who would just have these 80-year-old lungs and die at a young age because my lungs were that bad. It was and this really all of this suffering really caused me to be introspective, right? And that's kind of what happens in the spiritual journey as we see all the external stimuli out there and we understand that none of it really is fulfilling. So that leads us to the journey within to understand instinctively, which is amazing and beautiful when I look back in retrospect to see that I was unknowingly following my intuition and my instincts as a soul that came into this world. And I was trusting it and following it without even knowing it. So it was like in October of 2022, I was watching and learning about ancient aliens and ancient civilizations. And this was a new realm that I'd never been exposed to. Like I was deep in the matrix. I didn't care about any of that. I was out there fighting for social justice. I was out there protesting, following all of the matrixy stuff that keeps you in fear and keeps you sick. I was doing it all. And when I found out about like ancient aliens, I was like, whoa, this stuff is crazy. Like this is deep rabbit hole. And everybody knows, I'm sure once you go down the rabbit hole, you can't stop. It's just profound awakenings here and there and understandings and knowings. And that led me to Dr. Joe Dispenza. He changed my life. And he's changed a lot of people's lives. And I hope to meet him one day. But I saw him on an interview in a podcast on YouTube, and he was promoting his book, Becoming Supernatural. And something told me, right, my intuition, to buy that book. Like instantly, I knew that I had to buy that book. I didn't know why. I just thought it was interesting. And it was like, this was the spark and the catalyst that began my awakening journey. And you could feel it. And so that's what I've learned is like, there's always this really deep feeling and knowing when you're supposed to be led somewhere. And when you follow that, you may not know where it's going to lead you, but you understand that that's the right direction in which your life is supposed to go in order to evolve spiritually and just in this world to become a better, more loving person. And so I ordered the book. I got it 2 days later and I finished it in less than 2 weeks, but it taught me how to meditate. It connected the science with the spirituality, which is what I needed in the beginning stages of my awakening, because I had heard about all this religious stuff. I had heard about God, and I was more of like the person, yeah, well, I mean, if God exists, he exists. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Like, I don't know. I don't care. I didn't really understand that, like, diving within ourselves was discovering the little fractals of God that we are, right?
Yeah.
You know, I don't feel that we are God. I just feel like we are this piece of energy that has come from this one gigantic source to come figure out how to live a life on this earth. And then it's our job to kind of learn that that's who we are and then come back to that source as we're living in this life to be able to create through love, unconditional love, which is what that source sent us here for in the first place. And so it was in my second meditation where I had a spontaneous Kundalini awakening or Kundalini rising, and I had no idea what was even happening. It regulated my entire nervous system. And from that day on, I was off of my anxiety meds, depression. I was on Lexapro, Xanax, Klonopin. I was on Prozac at one point. I was on albuterol for my lungs. I was on breathing treatments, and it was gone. It was as if my awakening happened and my lungs opened up and my sickness was gone. And so for me, that was so deep and so profound because I'd suffered my whole life from a lung disease or a lung, whatever you'd want to call it, or whatever the medical society calls it, that can't be cured, right? Everybody says asthma can't be cured. There's no cure for asthma. You can't heal from asthma. Once you have it for the rest of your life, you just have it. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I realized that through my own experience and through my own internal validation that that's not true. I healed, my body healed through the power of love, through the power of God, or through, you know, whatever it is that you'd want to call, whatever it was that it is. We're all fighting over the names. I'm not really concerned about, you know, what everybody calls it because we're all the same and it's all the same feeling and we all heal the same way by coming back into union with the source that made us.
Yep.
And, I was learning how to do like the heart brain coherency meditation. And when I went to sit down in my second meditation, I felt that feeling again. And it's like a feeling it feels like anxiety, but it's the opposite of anxiety. It's just like an overwhelming love that just consumes your whole body. And I went and I sat with it and I spoke out and I reached out to God for probably the first time in my life, genuinely, right? Because many people say like, you can pray and you can talk to God, but if you don't feel what you're saying, you're not in alignment with what you're communicating to the universe. And so that was the first time in my life where I spoke what I felt, and it was, God, I know you're there. It was like I begged in a sense, like to just be reconnected to that source that I have been searching outside of myself my whole life. And that's when I truly found that love that was within myself, and it electrocuted me, is what it felt like. It came in through the top of my head, went into like the base of my spine, and then it shot up throughout the base of my spine, and it left me on the ground crying and bawling my eyes out. And then the thoughts were gone, the anxiety was gone, the depression was just gone in an instant, in a moment's notice. And like for me, it was the veil was lifted in that moment, right? Like that veil that's over our eyes was gone, and the wisdom came in, the healing came in, and the pain was gone, and it's just like you just knew it. You automatically just get this download, and your soul begins to take the reins now, and it makes the ego take a little bit of a back seat. And then that began the journey of, okay, like the ego coming up, and then that's what led me to here. And so I don't like to use this term, but it's like it put me on like I was on like this fast track awakening experience, because it's only been a year for me, but I've completely changed my whole life around. And like I don't care about making millions of dollars. I just want to help people heal. Right. And so whatever that looks like, that's my purpose. And they say to discover your purpose is to heal yourself and teach the world how you did it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm doing. And there's no manual, there's no guidebook, there's nobody tells you how to traverse through this journey, and that can be the hardest thing, because you can feel alone in a sense in these sorts of awakenings, and now here I am. So
Right. Well, and you do feel alone when you first get started. I've noticed though, like we're gathering more and more,
yes.
so it's getting easier. And as a healer myself, I've done a lot of energy healing. I would find the programming in the spine. So as you were, all that matrix programming would appear to me as these little sticks, like golden sticks. And if you pull them, they'll start to fall, almost like pickup sticks or something. And so you basically blew them out of
Yeah.
there with your Kundalini awakening. And you made room for your soul to come in, which I think is beautiful. And I think it's really important for people in my age group, which is in their 50s, to know that the people around them, it can happen that fast.
Yeah.
Because I know my age group is always asking, well, what's going to happen to my spouse, and what's going to happen to this person, and are they going to be okay? They will be okay, and you'll experience them just however they need to be experienced. They're not just
Oh,
going to disappear on you unless you need them to.
yeah.
So it's just a really interesting thing, and I think it's beautiful how you described it. I know my father talked about I grew up with hippie parents, and that's why my name is Honey.
I love that.
But so it's just really interesting how that all came about for you. And now you're kind of traveling around and free
Yeah.
and helping
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I've realized, is we have been sold such a lukewarm version of freedom, right? We
Oh,
think
yeah.
freedom is being able to go into the grocery store and buy 10 different types of cereal. We think freedom is being able to have rights, but we were born free. We were born sovereign. We
Mhm.
were born these spiritual, beautiful, creative babies, but society in their egotistical ways got their hands on us, right? Because they want to control, and control kind of stifles our creativity. And then we're sold this lukewarm version of free. And then when you have these profound awakenings, you recognize that the freedom lied in your mind, and it was caged by the fear, right? The fear programming. And that's the miracle, and that's the true blessing, and being saved by grace, or whatever you want to call it, right? It happens so instantaneous. And I think that's where the belief systems come in the way, where people think, well, it couldn't happen to me, or I'd never be able to do this, or never meditate. Well, your words cast spells, right?
Yeah.
So what you say, you become. And it lies in just the willingness to just be open to discovering new ways of being and expanding upon your belief systems, right? And
Mhm.
the freedom is all in the mind, and it's just, yeah, like you said, it can happen instantaneous, and you're regulated, and it's like you get a new set of eyeballs. It's in it, your brain works differently. You have more neural connections. You can use higher percentages of your brain, rather than like the normal human that can only use like 10%. Your
Mhm.
mind is quiet. You can absorb information much quicker, much easier, because you don't have the little man in the corner of your mind telling you to go do 100 million things. You've slowed down yourself and came back to like your natural state of being. And the way that I kind of like looked at it is like, my personality and who I was, or who I thought I was built by society. It
Mhm.
was built by my family. It was built by the programming and the conditioning and the trauma. And my family has suffered so much trauma. Mental illness runs in my family so deep, like anxiety, depression, panic attacks, suicide, murder. It goes very deep. And I believe that it is the most traumatized people, the most hurt people that go through life, that end up being the most extraordinary and powerful healers, because we've gone through the darkness. And that's in order for us to become a healer, we have to go through the darkest parts of ourselves and meet the deepest, darkest parts of ourselves, and understand that I am only who I am because society told me how to be, and I was just trying to appease that version of of the world.
Mhm.
And that's what happens when you remove those pins from your spine, like you said. It's like that personality just falls away, and you're left with almost a nothingness at the same moment. And that's the beauty of it, is because you almost get to rebuild this foundation.
Mhm.
And that's why it's such a beautiful thing, because you get to start over essentially, and um start from scratch, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and you've come into that higher consciousness out of this chakra, and you've left behind the fear chakra at the bottom, you know, all
Yes.
that pain and stuff. It gets like bottled up down there. And the
Yeah.
fact that you had your awakening, mine was like when I was in my 30s too, as far
Oh,
as the
wow.
Kundalini awakening. I knew a lot of stuff as a kid because I was allowed to.
Hmm.
So it was never stifled, but
Yeah.
it's just been a really interesting journey. And as you expand and you keep sharing it, you're sparking everybody else, because everybody has that spark, and your spark is sparking theirs. And you're also pulling from the field. So you're getting all that information is coming in from your soul, but also you're tapping into your other lifetimes that are going on at the same time. And you're tapping into your genetics too. So you blew out the genetic programming,
Yeah.
and it's a beautiful thing when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's like, because initially when it happened, I thought I was going crazy, and what I've learned is that's normal. It's
Yeah.
normal to think that you're going crazy and losing your mind, because you essentially are losing your mind. You're losing every aspect of who you thought you were, and we're afraid of that because we like to feel safe. We like
Mhm.
to feel comfortable, right? And that's why I always say the healer's journey is the warrior's journey. It's not for the faint of heart, right? Because it forces you essentially in a way to address aspects of yourself that we need to modify and change in order to become a more loving, evolved human being. And the ego doesn't want to do that, right? The ego wants to keep the barrier up, the walls up, and to protect itself, and to think that humans are evil. I personally and will always believe that humans, all forms of humans, instinctively at the very deepest core of themselves, even the most evil humans, want to be loved and want to love. And the most evil humans, there's something that they've gone through in their lives, which is why I have compassion for those people. Because people say, like, what about murderers or things like that? Well, when you have these awakenings, you become just a more graceful, understanding human being, because you understand how the human being works and the human mind works, and that people are only this way because society has created this system of control and greed. And then that's manifested into mental illness and disease and those sort of things, because we're not in alignment with our natural human capabilities. We came here to love each other and to create through unconditional love and unity. However, we've been put into a system that says the opposite. And when you take us out of our natural human capabilities, that's when we get sick. That's when we break down. And it's a beautiful thing to see the breaking down of all of this, right? Because we know that there's a huge, beautiful transformation and peace that's going to usher in the coming years. And it's
Mhm.
coming fast.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, and that's what I've learned, is that through the awakening journey, as we awaken others, we shorten that time frame. We shorten the time frame of that transition as we begin to embody this love and have people step into their truth. It shortens the transformation, and albeit it's going to be chaotic, we just have to understand that the process of the chaos, there's going to be the peace on the other side. And that's what happens when you awaken individually, right? You
Mhm.
met yourself with all that chaos in you, and then you release it, and then there's peace. Well, I believe collectively as society, that's how we heal. It just looks differently. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely see the chaos is coming this year, and how you experience it is how what your timeline is how you experience it. And a lot of people are going to experience it very beautifully. They're going to love it. They're going to be like,
Yeah.
finally, it's happening. And now we can build what we want to create. And
Mm,
some will wallow in the
yeah.
despair of it.
Yeah.
And there will be this mass awakening. It's how long is the person going to allow the awakening to happen? Because I've been
Yeah.
getting that some people will just glimpse it and then shut it off.
Yeah.
And but most of us, the people that we're talking to right now, they're ready to go forward in a different way and to have a different kind of
Hmm.
society
Yeah.
where those systems are broken down and gone.
Hmm.
We don't need them
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah.
I agree. And it's amazing to see like how we get the same like knowings and understandings that come from the collective or come from the field, because that's the same thing that I've been getting, is that this year is going to be a mass awakening. And when this mass awakening happens, if you haven't done the inner work, right, and done the healing and been able to even expand upon your belief system, people are going to be met and be grief stricken, right? And there's going to be, I believe that this is why this has happened to us in the early stages, right? So we can usher in and help people understand you're not going crazy. This is part of, you know, the awakening process. And even in like Eastern culture, right? They know what a Kundalini awakening is. They know what a spiritual awakening is. Our society in the United States, if you have a spiritual awakening, generally you're labeled crazy, thrown into a mental health institution, and then you're popped full of pills. And I've seen it happen firsthand with one of my sister's friends who
Oh,
has had this sort of thing happen. And you know, it's wild to see like how our system handles these sort of things. And I believe that's why it's happening to us over here, so we can sort of like, okay, just put your feet on the ground, put your feet in the dirt, you know, you are part of the earth, this is natural. It's, you know, it's very intense energetically. And
it is.
um yeah, it's
Yep.
but I'm ready for it. It has to happen, you know.
It has to happen. Where the entire universe is ascending right now, and the energies that we're getting that are pushing everybody forward, like they're not going to stop until we're there.
Yeah.
So I don't think, and I call God God's source, but the
Yeah.
way I saw it was basically like that's the Big Bang. The Big Bang is all those little sparks coming out and creating souls, and those souls are within us. That's your where you meet your soul, is that little spark.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, it's it's crazy. It's wild. I mean, I still catch myself because it's only been a year, and it still is a lot for me, right? And I
Mhm.
mean, I post a lot of content on my social media, and I'm expanding to my presence and that sort of stuff, but like it is an exhausting and intense experience. And so like one thing that I've had to learn is to just be okay with that feeling of like, where do I go? What do I do? What, like, how do I navigate through this? But like one thing that I want to portray to like most people, or to people that are going through this experience, is like you are going through one of the most miraculous shifts that has ever taken place on the history of this entire planet.
Mhm.
It's that big. You know, it's that big to me, where we are returning back to the natural state of being. The earth is returning back to her natural state of being, and it's chaotic. But to just be able to be here to witness the miracle of this transition, good and bad and ugly and beautiful,
Mhm.
right? We must accept all of the phases that we have to go through. And it's in those moments where I feel that uncertainty and that anxiety, is when I don't move. I never move when I'm feeling anxious, or I never move when I'm feeling any sort of like uncomfortable feeling, or make any rash decisions based in that feeling. I just sit with it, and I begin to learn and be introspective. And that's one way that we're kind of learning the opposite of what we've been taught. We've been taught to analyze everything. We've been taught to, I can't see it, I don't believe it. Right. And so now we're going to believe it and then see it, rather than see it to believe it. And so it's a lot, because we're unlearning and unbelieving everything that we've been taught, and realizing that there's so much more to life than what we've even been told. And
Yeah.
it's just to give yourself so much grace through this process, because it is a lot.
It is a lot. And everybody's going to have their own like process and their own awakening process. Like you had a totally different awakening process than I did. And nobody's going to like be expected to awaken in the same way. And I think that's something
Yeah.
that people need to let go of too.
Yes. And that was one thing that I had to let go of, because we love to compare
Mhm.
everything. We like to compare our situations and compare, like we compare suffering to the suffering of the world, and then we minimize our own pain because we see that there's people suffering worse in the world. Or we compare, are we, excuse me, meditating correctly? Or we just, comparison is the ultimate, what does it say? Comparison is the ultimate form of failure or something like, or I can't
I
remember
don't
what it
know,
is,
but
but
it's a waste of
I've
time.
learned to just, right, I've just learned to not compare. My life, my awakening, my spirituality is mine and mine alone, and that's the
Mhm.
one thing that nobody can take from me. And I believe that the most profound awakenings that I've ever had were just sitting in the silence with myself with a sober mind, right? Without the plant medicine, without all of that sort of stuff to bring me into that space. It was laying there and sitting there and being able to feel those subtle energies move through me, is when you develop the wisdom and the knowing and the understanding in the most quiet parts of your day. And that's kind of the hardest thing for people to work through, is like the mind is racing and racing, and the first step is to shut that off, to pull the mind back. And when you still the mind and you get to that space of silence, that's when the healing starts to happen. That's when the love starts to grow, and the trust and the faith and the surrendering to all of it, to the divine, and just
Mhm.
realizing you can't control any of this. The only thing I can control is my response to the external world, and
Right.
that's it.
Yeah. Well, and there's so
Yeah.
many ways that people may be triggered to get started. And I
Hmm.
think that's really important to know that like there's signs there for you. So you
Yeah.
had signs that you were following and you did it. Like you actually followed.
Yeah.
You didn't say, "Oh no, I'll buy that book next month." You went out and you got it right away.
Yeah.
So when you're being asked to do something, that's your soul asking you to do it so that you can
Yeah.
wake up.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about it, because I instinctively was following my soul even before my awakening. I've
Mhm.
realized when I was led to Chicago, I had that deep feeling and knowing that, yeah, I was stepping into a whole brand new city, going into a job that I had no idea I managed a bakery slash gas station for 8, 9 years, got my degree in finance, and then worked in the mortgage industry, gave up everything, all of it, all my stuff. I gave up. I pulled out my retirement, and I wanted to move to Chicago because I knew that there was something there for me. And I
Mhm.
was unknowingly following my instincts, right? And my soul was guiding me to Chicago, because it was in Chicago where I had my awakening. It was in Chicago where I had to go through these deep, dark nights of the soul, where I had to understand that, like all the drugs I was doing, the alcohol, the partying, the distractions, it was only leading to my demise. It was only leading to my suffering. And so I had to go through those sort of things, and coming out on the other side of it, you look back and we realize we instinctively do want to follow our soul's guidance. And
Mhm.
as you follow it and you're met with the validation through following it, that's how we build the faith and the trust in the something that we really can't see, but we know that it's working for us, for our greater good. Even though we can't see it right now, we just have to trust through the process.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is trust.
Mm. Yes.
Yep.
And that, yeah, and I've always boiled it down to three words: trust, faith, and surrender. As we surrender to life, and just to allow it to flow, and to just become observant, and not trying to force anything, not trying to force the changes to happen in our lives, just surrendering to the flow, right? And releasing control. And as you learn to surrender, you observe the things in your life begin to come together, and that builds the trust, that builds the faith. And so you operate, all of these things build off of each other. And as they build, that's where you become limitless. And you realize that, and I'm very big into like, no man, woman, or person on this earth can do something that God couldn't do for me, or that I couldn't do within myself by following God's guidance, because that's where the true guidance comes. And it's all written on our hearts. That's what people, and that's what I used to think. I used to think, wow, people with spiritual gifts, like, they're more special. They must have something that I don't have, that God, bestowed upon them. or people that have the gift of healing, that people that have the gift of knowing, clairvoyance, clairaudience. I always thought that was just something that special humans got. But we all have those capabilities. Our beliefs are standing in the way, our emotions are standing in the way, and we are standing in the way. And once we get out of the way, our body begins to just self-regulate back to its natural state of being, which is clairvoyant, clairaudient, psychic, medium, whatever it is that you want to call it. These are our sovereign birthrights. These are our gifts to discover.
They are. They totally
Yeah.
are. So have you heard about how the body is changing from carbon to crystalline?
So I have, but I haven't really dove into it. So I'm interested
Okay.
to hear.
Well, so one of the things I learned today that was kind of fun, is that if you look at the DNA from the top, it looks like a cymatic, like, thing. So cymatics is basically sound shown in a picture. So different sound.
Yeah. Yep.
But what's happening is we've been carbon based. We're actually becoming crystalline now. So think about all the stress that we've gone through is changing the body and activating all of the strands of DNA, because we have 12 and only 2 of them have been active because those ancient aliens that you were researching deactivated 10 of them. So,
Really?
and there's controversy about how many there actually are, but I get it's 12. And when you get those 10 strands of DNA reactivated, it gives you more awareness, because that's where like our antennas are to access your magic. And we're also being squeezed. So if you think about how carbon changes under pressure to diamond, we are becoming that crystal, that diamond, and our DNA is changing, and pretty soon we were not going to need as much food. Our nervous system is going to be totally different. So many things are happening, and our brain is also changing to allow more in, because we've had this reptilian brainstem that's kept so much of the information away from us. So it's like it takes 90% of the information, it keeps it blocked. So I think that the Kundalini awakening is a big step towards that, but the frequencies that are coming in now are going to continue that change for all of us. And I talked to somebody this morning and they said, oh, my third eye lit up this morning. It's never happened before. It got hot. And I was like, yay. So many good things are happening. And I think we're going into a time of learning our magic, because it was taken away and now it's being brought back.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I've learned and that I am learning. And we think of at least I used to think of oh, these magical gifts, these there's something that are just so woo-woo and out there. But I'm understanding that it's just the way of being, that and it's not as complicated is what I'm trying to say as we make it out to be. These things, they just come to you, and then you begin to move through life, right, with these new gifts and these new knowings. For example, I am so analytical of people now. I'm so observant. I can understand I know that I can trust you or not trust you within the first 30 seconds of meeting you. I know the type of person that you are. I know what your triggers. I know I can see. You can just see the intentions of people. You know what they're struggling with internally. You can really see people for who they are, because you've become so observant, and now you understand how people work because it's how you work. And we are each other. We are the same, but we've been told so often that we're so separate and different because your skin looks different than my skin, and I like this type of people and you but we all come from the same thing. We just look differently, and we've been told that we're separate. And maybe we do come from different star systems or different galaxies or things of that nature. I don't personally know, I don't know what, I've just come down to like and boiled it down to the most simple way of being. And it's that emotional regulation and self mastery is the most important thing that we can do in this life, because that's what allows us to evolve and harness these gifts. And that's how we're meant to move through life. And,
Yep.
just as you said, like a diamond or coal under pressure turns into a diamond. Like, it's so true. Like, I've learned like the macrocosm and the microcosm, we are all the same thing. We just mold and shape differently. So it just looks differently, but the process and the transformation is the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we all have the same origin point, when that
Yeah.
big bang, we'll just call it the big bang, came out.
Mm,
But I don't think the big bang is at all what they say it is.
yeah.
So the big bang is us, like souls coming out and being released from God so that God source can have this experience and have the different perspectives,
Mm,
because we've been distorted in different ways so that we can have different perspectives. And then
yes.
we can bring all that information back. And to me, it's like it's been a huge growth period for God source. That's what we're
Yeah.
doing. So we're all a part of that.
Yeah.
And we don't need to be polarized anymore because we've reached the end of that.
Mm,
And now everybody is going into unity.
hmm.
So we're going to be able to see each other, just like you said. Like, basically what you're doing is you're reading their field.
Yeah.
So you have somebody come and see you and you're like, oh, I know who you are. I'm reading who
Yeah.
you are. Whether you know what it really looks like, all the little symbols on their field or not, you
Yeah.
intuitively know.
Yeah. And
So yeah, it's beautiful. And it
yeah.
really changes everything. It helps you help them better.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's so crazy because I was talking with one of my good friends, and she's currently reading the Gene Keys
Mhm.
book. And like she was telling, she did my it was a certain chart that she did, and it shows like, what sort of gene keys I have. I don't know the words of it. I'm still a spiritual baby too. That's what people don't realize. I'm still in like my spiritual baby phase, like still learning all of this sort of stuff. So like, but she was telling me that I'm a projector, and
Yeah.
there's like manifestors and generators, and she's like, you are unknowingly even following your purpose as being a projector. And like, it's crazy too, because like when I'm in like my coaching calls with people, or when I'm sitting down even just having conversations with others, when I get into that space and I just become fully present with you, I don't even know what I'm going to say. I don't even know what's going to come up. I just know that I'm going to have the correct response to tell you what it is that you need to hear as the words are flowing out of your mouth, because the understanding and the knowing just comes right to me. And then it flows out. And that's the beauty of it too, is because like I went my whole freaking life like working so hard to like make a living and working so hard to get a college degree, and then who knows that my life's purpose was to just sit here and be present with you and be able to help you heal with like no training, no certificates, no degrees. And like our world gears us to think like you have to have all of these credentials and things of that nature, but like when you come back and you heal your own pain, you develop that wisdom, like that's your certificate, like that's your
Yeah.
degree, is going through your own healing journey and embodying that. And that I'm not a Christian by no means, but like that's what I believe the teachings of Jesus were, and
Mhm.
many other spiritual leaders, right, that are very evolved, Buddha, Krishna, all of them. And that's the beauty of it, is like I take everything that resonates with me. And a lot of people will say it's cherry picking, and whether it's cherry picking or not, right? In this day and age, you have to be able to use your own spiritual discernment to
Yeah.
traverse through this, because there's so much stuff that you can get stuck in, and so much
Mhm.
stuff that can be confusing. And I've just learned that like if it feels good to me, then God's telling me okay. If it doesn't feel good to me, those are my instincts saying that, just set it to the side. It doesn't mean that it's wrong. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that it's not for me, and maybe it's for somebody else to learn their certain lessons. But um it's a lot. because there's just so much to learn.
There is, but you have it all. Like we've already learned it all in all of those lifetimes that we've had, and you're just remembering it. Like it's just coming back to you. But there's like this, what was I trying to say? There was something about, oh, so systems and certificates and all of that, they're not really going to apply anymore because we're basically intuitively healing people.
Hmm.
And we don't need them, and they're not going to need them from us either, because we don't want to be in a like, here's my 3D certificate on how I did this. And you're trying to bring someone into the 5D,
Hmm.
and we're basically
Yeah.
moving from third density, which is not dimension, but third density into fifth density. And that's a massive jump. And that's
Yeah.
why our bodies are changing too. I don't know. Have you ever heard
Yeah.
of the gateway process?
I have, but I haven't. I mean, I've heard of it, but it's not something I've.
I didn't read it, but the gist of it is that in a different density, you know that walls don't exist. So you can walk through a wall. And this came from a 3-letter agency that I won't mention because that's what gets tagged on YouTube. But
Mm.
basically that's what ETs do. That's what interdimensional beings do, is they walk through the wall. So
Mm.
eventually that will be something that we can do. And
Wow.
then we'll be able to see those interdimensional beings so much better because we'll be on the same plane that they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
That's
going to be
amazing.
really fun.
Yeah. And so when are you thinking that, when do you think this sort of stuff is going to like begin to start really like, because like what
It's
I'm,
just started.
and do you think it's going to be like a process over like decades or
No,
year?
I
Like,
think well, what I got for 2024 is that we have 3 sections. So if you know about parallel universes or parallels,
mhm,
basically there's one group that's kind of wallowing in the mire and they're stuck with tons of programming.
yeah.
Then there's a middle group that is just kind of figuring it out and they're ready to pop up, but it will take them a little while. And then there's an upper group that's been working on it. And they may be working on it like you had an accelerated awakening,
Yeah.
or they maybe they've been doing it for 30 years.
Hmm.
But the people that are in the upper parallels will be able to go dive in and out of what the veil, like they'll be able to make it disappear when they want it to.
Yeah.
And then the ones below that, they'll start to get bigger and bigger glimpses of it. And
Hmm.
they'll start doing what we're doing now. And the ones on the bottom, that is the separation point. If they decide not to awaken, then they will, like Dolores Cannon says, end up on this other Earth, the 3D Earth.
Yeah.
And we will be on the 5D Earth. So we are at the separation point when it really starts right now.
Okay.
Yeah. But I've been seeing things from the corner of my eye and also seeing auras and things like that, which I never have seen before. So it's
Yeah.
starting, but it's all
Hmm.
about, can you allow it in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've been noticing that too. So like I've been seeing like I'll just see like a shadowy like
Mhm.
streak like go across the room or like across my eye or like things like that. But there's just no fear. If I would have like if I wouldn't have had my awakening, there would have been so much fear through all of
Right.
this. And I think that's the most beautiful part of awakening is just recognizing the illusion of fear. So fear
Mhm.
no longer has a place in your life. You know, if I'm
Yeah.
being chased by a tiger or if I'm getting eaten by a shark, of course I'm going to be fearful of something. But like you just recognize fear for what it is, and you no longer fight it. You no longer, it just is. And the removal of fear is just like one of the best parts of
Oh,
my awakening, I would have to say.
yeah,
And I
it's the
am
best.
also like, I'm also requiring way less food. Like I eat once a day, and I only eat when my body's like, hey, I want to, we've been so programmed to breakfast, lunch,
Yeah,
dinner, breakfast, lunch, dinner. And it's like, I sometimes I don't eat until late at night. Sometimes I'll eat in the morning. Like I just eat when my body tells me to eat. And that's another thing that I've learned is like I just intuitively eat. And I think a lot of in the community, there's a lot of like you have to eat a certain vegetables and fruits. You can't eat meat. You can't eat this. You can't eat that. And I've just learned there's so many stipulations of like, in order for you to ascend, you have to remove meat from your diet. Well, I had my second Kundalini, and I was eating a pound of ground beef every day leading up to it because my body was just like, I need meat. Like,
yeah,
and I was just like instinctively eating so much meat. And I'm like, what the heck? And so like that's another thing that I've learned too is like when you're going through these profound awakening, Kundalini awakenings, your body really needs food to feed
yeah,
that energy. And I didn't know that. It's the funny thing. I just instinctively was doing what I was supposed to do and following that guidance that my soul was telling me. And, I don't eat meat all the time, right? I eat meat when my body says that it wants meat. And, I'll eat a cookie, a sugar cookie here and there. Like I don't judge my food anymore because it's more important the mindset that you hold rather than, what it is. I mean, what you put in your body, yes, is important in moderation, right? But like, you're not going to descend spiritually if you have a freaking sugar cookie or a glass of
no.
wine or things of that nature. And so
Mm-mm.
like that's another thing that I'm learning to like work through and also break through with the spiritual community because like I escaped the matrix, right? Not to be put into another spiritual matrix. And so I think that's also another part of what we're seeing happen is like people are saying like, well, in order to be spiritual, you have to do this, or you haven't had a true Kundalini awakening if it's this. But like we're removing these judgments and opinions, right? Not to go into another world of judgments and opinions. It's just kind of being and allowing the foundation of understanding because nobody has all the answers. Nobody's going to
No.
know everything about all this. Like we're literally learning we're being rebirthed
Mhm.
essentially. Like we're all having these spiritual babies and trying to figure it all out ourselves. And that's I
Yeah.
just have kind of removed all the pressure from society and in the community because like that was creating a lot of turmoil within me because I wanted to feel like I was doing it correctly. And there's really no one correct way to do this. It's all about just being a good, loving person and with unconditional love and, operating from that aspect of life. And that's your body will naturally evolve because you're
Yeah.
embodying the frequency and vibration of creation. And that's what I've just learned is like when you embody love, that's what created all of this. So when you be that, your universe begins to just create.
It does. And the food thing has been a real like back and forth in my community. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, now my body wants a hamburger
Yeah.
and getting all this feedback about it and not being upset about it because really it's important that we do what our body wants because our body is
Yeah.
going through the biggest change of all.
Yeah.
Because our soul, like our soul has done this already. It knows how to ascend. It's been through ascension, but nobody's ever ascended a body consciousness before.
Yeah.
And that's a really big deal. So be kind to your body. If it wants something, let it have it, even if it is sugar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And stop judging your food. Like that's a big one because we do live in this world where it's like Bill Gates and the pesticides and they want to control what you eat and the food is poison, the tap water is poison. And just imagine what you're speaking into that food and into that water. You're just reaffirming that your body is going to absorb all of those poisons. But it's proven that when you're in a constant state of gratitude, right, you absorb 40% more of the nutrients from the food that you take in.
Yeah.
So, that's what I've learned. That is what prayer is. Prayer is stilling the mind and just putting your body into a state of gratitude before you eat, to allow it to absorb and to digest in the way that it's supposed to. Right.
Mhm.
So that's why, we only have so much energy. If we're on our phone and angry while we're eating, well, then we're taking away from what our body's meant to do. And I
Yeah.
think that's what people don't realize is like our bodies are so freaking smart when we get out of the way. When we get out of the way, our body does what it absolutely needs to do. We're self-regenerating organisms. We literally are meant to heal,
Yeah.
right? But we've just been sold this, well, you're meant to get sick and die at 70 years old, so take this pill. Well,
Right.
no.
Yeah. And our stem
Yeah.
cells are actually not stem cells. What are those called? Um, there's this one cell I can't remember the name of, but they're meant to rejuvenate, and they start to, telomeres. They start to
Mm,
like shrink over
yeah,
time, and it's programming that's shrinking them. It's
yeah,
not, it's not the fact that they have to shrink. So I
yeah.
think our lives are going to be extended tremendously through this process. And I've always,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's the knowing that I've gotten too, was just because I mean, if you just look at it, if you live in a constant state of fight or flight, your body is just going to degenerate. Your body can't keep up with being in fear and feeling like it's being chased by a lion its whole life,
no,
right? That's why the disease manifests, the sickness manifests, because your body's trying to tell you, hey, this is not the proper environment for me to be in. And if we change that environment, guess what happens? The disease is gone.
yep,
The symptoms are gone, right? And people, it's hard for people to compartmentalize that because they're like, no, in order for my disease to be gone, I have to trust the medical professionals at the top. But that's just not the truth. Like, I had asthma my whole life, and now I've never breathed better. And I'm still not on an inhaler. I don't require an inhaler. And that's just proof right there for me. I've been told my whole life I'm going to have this asthma until the day that I die, but it's healed now. And so that just goes to show that there's something missing in our society that we're not telling each other or telling the people for a reason. And that's because our health is a business, So it's like,
yeah,
and I'm glad that we're getting away from that. And it's amazing to see people wake up because, like, we all deserve to heal. We all deserve to feel good. And there's just so much suffering on the planet, and it's finally turning and making a turning point, and it's a beautiful thing to see.
it really is. It's so beautiful. And I love that you healed your asthma because when I was 7, I had a near-death experience, and it was due to asthma. And when I was in my 30s, I went on this one diet that my naturopath gave me, and my asthma was gone.
Yeah.
So really, you can get rid of whatever it is. It doesn't matter. Your body wants to heal.
Yeah.
So you really can. And I think it's beautiful that you were able to blast it out of there.
Yeah. And
So
it's
it's
really
great.
it's the lifestyle, right? It's our lifestyle when it changes and we give our body the proper environment,
Mhm.
peaceful, calm, not racing thoughts. I believe that my asthma was my body's way of saying throughout my whole life that I'm not living in the proper environment. Like, I believe, and they say that there's like a shaman illness, a shaman sickness.
Yeah.
That was my shaman illness. My shaman illness was my asthma, and my asthma was gone. And that's how I learned that I am a healer, or whatever it is that, whatever we'd like to call it. Um, and I believe that everybody has, or a lot of people have those sort of like
Oh
autoimmune
yeah.
diseases, those things that are arise. That's our body's way of communicating with us. But we're so used to not listening to our body. We're so used to searching out there for the
Mhm.
healing. We're so out there for the cure, out there, when really everything we need is in here. All all of it. And
Yeah,
we just have to go within to find it. And
exactly.
yeah,
That's your direct line. Your
yeah,
direct line is within. Yep.
yes.
So this was a lot of fun, Matt. A lot of
Yeah,
fun.
no, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a great.
So, and
Oh
I'm gonna
wow, it's already
put,
been an hour.
yeah, it's been an hour. So I'm gonna
Man.
put all your stuff below for everybody, and I would love to talk to you again. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be great. So
Yeah,
thank
I
you so
absolutely. And
much.
whenever you have time, my schedule is pretty free and pretty open. I'm going through a lot of rebranding, which is amazing. Like there's a lot of crazy wild things that I'm about to do.
Good.
You can yeah, so it's coming out, it's happening, but you know, and the biggest thing too that I would just have to say is like we're going to be called to take huge risks and to take huge jumps and to dive in and to not know anything that is going to happen. But it's in those moments where we dive into the unknown, feet first, head first, however you want to dive into it. As long as you're diving into it, God will catch you. Source, universe will catch us because this is what we came here for. This is the process. This is how we usher in a newfound sense of peace with humanity. And, you know, just know if you're being guided to take the risks, to take the fall, to jump in and to create something that you don't even know how it's going to turn out, just know that you will be held and you will have a new community that's being built and centered around you to support you and to usher this in because this is what we came here for.
So good. So well said.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay.
Yes, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, bye everybody.